Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to day 23 of the 31 Days of Horror. DBougie86 back up in this. That is right, everybody. I have returned to give you a film from 2019, actually. This is actually one that I actually seen in theaters when it first came out, and I was very excited to check it out again. It's been a while. Uh, and that is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Yeah. Uh, you're wondering, like, Derek, kids horror movie? I'll get into it in a minute. But, yeah, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is produced by Guillermo del Toro, uh, which he actually co-wrote the screen story with Marcus Dunson and Patrick Melton. If you don't know those names, they're pretty much the guys who wrote majority of the Saw series. They wrote Feast, The Collector. Uh, yeah, that was very interesting learning that they co-wrote the story with Del Toro. But then the director of this film is actually Andre Overdahl. If you don't know that name at all, he's probably most recognizable for his first movie, Troll Hunter, which was a big hit when it first came out around here. I remember everyone talking about that movie. And then he did The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is also a very awesome movie, which builds on the mystery of what's going on, and when you find out, it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, if you don't know what this is, it's pretty much like a adaptation of uh, if you remember these book collections when you were a kid, known as Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Uh, this is pretty much like a bunch of those stories intertwined with like a singular story, which, a lot of people, when they first heard about this coming out, they were nitpicking at it because they're like, what the hell is it? I'd rather have like an anthology style film, but I'm like, I kind of like this idea better, how they did it and intertwined with like this story that they made on their own. But we'll get into that in a minute. Pretty much the main setup of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the film, is we're introduced back into 1968 in this town called Mill Valley in Pennsylvania, and we're introduced to our main cast of characters that we follow through the rest of the movie. We have like Stella, who's our like main character, and I'll get into my thing with Stella in a minute. But then we also have like her friends Chuck and Augie, and they end up doing like this prank on this bully named Tommy, who's actually on a date with Chuck's sister, which is funny when you find out. But then, they end up running into like this guy who just actually came into town named Ramon. And, he helps them get away from Tommy for a bit. But what ends up happening is Stella's like, invites Ramon, you want to go see a real haunted house? So they end up going to this house that actually was the house of Sarah Bellows, which they tell the backstory. She was a girl that was kind of locked away, and things happened to her, and she died in the house, and she wrote scary stories. So they end up finding this secret room where they find one of Sarah Bellows' books of her scary stories, and they, unbeknownst to them, Tommy gets involved and locks them in the room, and they're all there as this happens. But Stella ends up awakening Sarah Bellows, and what Sarah Bellows ends up doing is taking her vengeance out on the people that have woken her and disturbed her. So Stella still has the book, and this is kind of the setup where the book's starting to write stories on its own, and they involve characters' names that she's involved. Like the first story, Harold, who's this guy on the cover of this, has a character named Tommy, and as we see it being written out, the Tommy is being stalked and killed by Harold. And that's pretty much the setup of the movie, where pretty much the rest of the majority of the film is Stella and her friends trying to figure out a way to stop Sarah Bellows before their stories are told, pretty much. That will end them, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the plot. Now, my thoughts on the film. This film kind of blew me away when I first seen it, because I wasn't really expecting much from this. And, PG-13 kids horror film. And it's kind of scary in the sense where some of the deaths and kills are great, and I love what they did when they took like those old illustrations from those books and put them in film. Like Harold looks exactly like Harold from the book. The Pale Lady, whole nightmare fuel. That scene, that whole sequence is fucking nightmare fuel. But yeah, a lot of things that I dig about this movie is I like the story that they actually tell within the film. I like the idea of the Cerebello's curse is kind of like a, it kind of has like a J horror feel to it, in a degree of how Cerebello's is awakened and how the stories and even like the climax of the movie kind of ends like a J horror movie in a way, and I like that about it. And the thing that I like is the characters. I know a lot of people had gripes like the kids are kind of obnoxious. I'm like, they're kids. They're supposed to be. They're having fun. Do they act like kids from the '60s? I don't know, but they act like kids, And I love the Stella character. The thing I love about Stella is they made her a horror fan, in the sense where I love her room. It's filled with like all these old '50s and '60s horror movie posters, which sucked me right in. And I love the atmosphere of this movie. I love that it begins on Halloween, in the sense where it goes on, and I believe the actual date that it actually ends is actually November 5th of the events. So it's like a 6-day event that happens to these kids during their lifetime, and it's pretty great. I know, like, I was actually watching some of the special features on this 4K, and Andre Overdahl kind of wanted to make his version of an Amblin film, like a early Steven Spielberg, like Goonies or like E.T., and he did. This does feel like that film, but he made it his own in the same sense where, he has like all this aspects of life during that time period, and it's great for that. It has that feel. It has a great atmosphere to the film, and great characters. Uh, I know a lot of people don't mention this when they do reviews on this, but Dean Norris, who's a character actor that I loved, he was in like Total Recall and like Breaking Bad, actually plays Stella's father. There's actually this fucking great scene in the movie, which actually kind of makes me tear up, where they kind of get a phone call with each other, because Stella doesn't know if this might be the last time she talks to her dad, and they have some animosity because her mom actually left and disappeared, and he's like tearing up because they're like, it's not your fault that she left, and they have like this heart to heart moment in the middle of the movie, and he's like, whoa, kind of getting some vibes here, I love that scene, and it's well acted in that scene in general, and I think the girl who plays Stella is like kind of an underrated actress. I didn't really see her much before this, and I don't know if she's been, because how the world's been. Hopefully, I see her in more stuff, because she's a great little actress, and it was great to see this film and the aspects of it. And Del Toro and Overdahl did a fantastic job with this film, putting it together and bring it to life. And it is scary. There is some nightmare fuel. Maybe the plot may be a little bit consistent, but it's written for like a more younger audience in that sense too, where people will be like, oh, they found that book real fast. But other than that, it's like, that's typical like Amblin shit too. They find shit and discover and solve shit fast in those movies, and no one fucking bitches about that. But that's the way I feel about scary stories to tell in the dark. It's a love letter to an era of movies that we grew up watching, but done in a sophisticated way to make it its own movie, And I like that about it. If you haven't seen it and you're skeptical of seeing it, I highly recommend it. It's fucking great, in my opinion. So, yeah, check it out. Alright, guys, that's it for day 23. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be back tomorrow with another one, so I'll see you then. Bye-bye.